You'll always come back to family, Marcus. We're all you really have. My wife Jessica said while packing her bags. She thought 12 years of marriage meant I'd never discover her secret family meetings, but I'd been recording everything for months. The divorce papers sat on my kitchen table, still warm from the printer. Jessica had just walked out with our two kids, Lily and Connor, heading straight to her mother's house where they'd been planning this for God knows how long. What she didn't know was that I'd installed security cameras throughout our house 6 months ago, and every conversation, every phone call, every whispered plan had been captured in crystal clear audio and video. I sat there in the silence of my empty house, remembering last Christmas morning. Lily had been so excited about the bike I'd assembled for her, and Connor couldn't stop hugging me for the gaming setup I'd surprised him with. Jessica had smiled at me across the living room, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. We were a family. That memory felt like a lifetime ago now, poisoned by the knowledge of what Jessica and her family had been planning even then. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was some explanation for all of this that didn't involve my wife systematically betraying me. But then I remembered Connor's face when he'd asked me last week if I was going to hurt Mommy like I supposedly hurt her feelings. My 7-year-old son had been coached to fear his own father. My marriage to Jessica had always been complicated by her family. Her mother, Patricia, was a master manipulator who'd never accepted me as good enough for her daughter. Her brother, Austin, constantly needed money for his latest failed business venture. Her sister, Michelle, treated our home like her personal hotel whenever she fought with her husband. But I'd tolerated it all because I loved Jessica and wanted to keep our family together. The pain hit me hardest when I thought about my kids. Lily, who was 10, had started asking me strange questions over the past few months. "Daddy, do you ever get really angry at Mommy?" she'd asked one evening while I was helping her with homework. The question had seemed innocent enough, but now I understood it was coached. They'd been training my own daughter to gather evidence against me. Connor, only 7, had begun flinching when I raised my voice even slightly during normal parenting moments. My own son was being taught to fear me. The realization that Jessica was weaponizing our children against me felt like a physical blow every time I thought about it. These weren't just my kids, they were my world, my reason for working 70-hour weeks, my motivation for everything I'd built. I'd missed Lily's school plays and Connor's baseball games to provide for this family. I'd canceled vacations and skipped birthday parties to build the architectural firm that gave us our comfortable life. And Jessica was systematically destroying their trust in me, turning them into weapons in her family's war against me. What kind of mother does that to her own children? What kind of person sacrifices their kids' emotional well-being for money? I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd record his own wife. The idea had made me sick when I first considered it. But when she started using our kids as pawns in her family's game, when she began poisoning their minds against their father, I knew I had to protect them somehow. Honor means protecting your children, even from their own mother when necessary. I should have seen the signs earlier. The hushed phone calls that stopped when I entered the room, the family gatherings I wasn't invited to anymore. The way Jessica's attitude toward me had grown increasingly cold and dismissive over the past year. She'd started questioning every decision I made, from our vacation plans to how I disciplined our children. Her family had been whispering poison in her ear, and I'd been too trusting to realize it. The breaking point came 3 months ago when I discovered Jessica had been secretly meeting with a divorce attorney. Not just any attorney, but one her mother had recommended and was apparently helping to pay for. I'd found the business card hidden in her purse, along with notes about our assets and income. That's when I realized this wasn't just marital problems, this was a coordinated family attack designed to destroy me financially and emotionally. I'd built a successful architectural firm over the past decade, working brutal hours to provide the life Jessica claimed she wanted. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs that I'd designed myself, luxury cars, and enough savings to send both kids to college without loans. But apparently, that wasn't enough for her family. They wanted more, and they'd convinced Jessica that she deserved half of everything I'd worked for, plus alimony and child support that would cripple me financially. The recordings I'd made revealed the full scope of their plan. Patricia had been coaching Jessica on how to document my supposed emotional abuse and financial control. Austin had been researching ways to hide assets and inflate Jessica's financial needs. Michelle had been practicing testimony about my alleged drinking problem and anger issues. They'd created an entire fictional narrative about our marriage, painting me as a controlling monster who'd been psychologically tormenting Jessica for years. What made it worse was how they'd involved our children. The recordings captured Patricia coaching Jessica on how to get the kids to say damaging things about me. "Ask them leading questions," I'd heard Patricia say. "Children are very suggestible. If you ask Lily whether Daddy ever scares her, she'll start remembering times when he might have seemed scary, even if he wasn't." The most damaging recording came from last month. Jessica was on the phone with her mother, discussing their timeline for the divorce. "The kids are starting to come around," Jessica had said. "Lily asked me yesterday if we were getting divorced because Daddy was mean to me. I told her that sometimes grown-ups can't live together when one person makes the other person sad all the time." My own wife was teaching our daughter that I was the villain in our family story. She was rewriting our entire marriage history, turning herself into a victim and me into an abuser, and she was using our children as her audience. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. Patricia's voice came through clearly on the recording. "Good. The more the children see you as the victim, the better it will be for custody. Judges always side with the mother, especially when the children express preference for living with her." But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was the same trusting fool who'd been bankrolling their family emergencies for 12 years. They thought I'd never suspect my own wife of betraying me so completely. They believed their manipulation was so subtle that I'd never catch on to their coordinated attack. They were wrong. I'd been documenting everything for months. Every conversation, every lie, every attempt to manipulate our children. My attorney had reviewed the recordings and confirmed they were legally admissible. The private investigator I'd hired had uncovered Jessica's secret bank accounts and her mother's financial contributions to the divorce planning. I had evidence of their conspiracy to defraud me and alienate my children. The knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. It was my attorney, David Kim, arriving with the counter-filing papers. Jessica thought she was about to blindside me with divorce papers next week. Instead, I was about to serve her with documents that would expose every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to destroy my relationship with my children. "Are you ready for this, Marcus?" David asked, setting his briefcase on my kitchen table. "Once we file these counter-claims, there's no going back. We're not just fighting the divorce, we're going after them for conspiracy, fraud, and parental alienation." David had become more than just my attorney over the past few months. He'd gone through his own divorce 5 years earlier and understood what it meant to fight for your children. "I've seen a lot of ugly divorces," he'd told me during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "But what Jessica's family is doing to those kids, that's not just divorce tactics, that's psychological warfare." I looked at the stack of evidence we'd compiled. Hours of recordings, financial documents, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen Jessica's family's behavior. Screenshots of text messages between Jessica and her mother discussing their strategy for the divorce. Bank records showing the money Patricia had been funneling to Jessica's attorney. "I'm ready," I said. "They want to play games with my family and my children. Let's see how they handle the consequences." David nodded and began spreading the documents across the table. The recordings are devastating. Jessica's mother coaching her on how to fake abuse allegations, her brother discussing asset hiding, her sister practicing false testimony. The judge is going to be furious when they see this level of premeditation and deception. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jessica's family had spent months planning to destroy me using lies and manipulation, but their own words, captured on my security system, were about to destroy them instead. They'd been so confident in their scheme that they'd gotten careless, discussing their plans openly in my own home. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Marcus, we need to talk. I'm coming over tomorrow morning with my attorney." It's time we discussed our future honestly. I showed the message to David, who laughed grimly. "She still thinks she's in control of this situation. Tomorrow morning is going to be quite a shock for her. The next morning, Jessica arrived at our house with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Rebecca Torres who specialized in high-asset divorces. Jessica looked confident, almost smug, as she sat across from me at our dining room table. She had no idea that every word she was about to say was being recorded by the same system that had captured her family's conspiracy. "Marcus, I think we both know this marriage is over," Jessica began, her voice steady and rehearsed. "I've tried to make it work, but your controlling behavior and emotional abuse have made it impossible for me to stay. I'm filing for divorce, and I think it's best if we can handle this amicably." Rebecca Torres slid a folder across the table. "These are our initial demands. Mrs. Chen is seeking 50% of all marital assets, including your business, plus spousal support of $10,000 per month. Given the emotional trauma she's endured, we believe this is more than fair." I looked at the papers without opening them. Emotional trauma, that's interesting. Can you be more specific about this alleged abuse? Jessica's eyes flashed with what looked like practice pain. "You know exactly what you've done, Marcus. The way you control our finances, monitor my spending, isolate me from my family. The anger issues, the drinking, the way you've turned our children against me." "Turned our children against you?" I kept my voice calm, knowing every word was being recorded. "Jessica, Lily and Connor live with you. They see you every day." "How exactly have I turned them against you?" Rebecca Torres interrupted. "Mr. Chen, we have extensive documentation of your behavior. Witness statements, financial records, evidence of psychological manipulation. We're prepared to present a compelling case for abuse and seek maximum custody restrictions." That's when David Kim entered the room, carrying a large box of files. Jessica's face went pale as she recognized him. She'd seen him at several business functions over the years and knew he was one of the best family law attorneys in the state. "I'm sorry I'm late," David said, setting the box down with a heavy thud. "I had to make copies of all the evidence we've compiled." Rebecca, I think you should know that my client has been conducting his own investigation into this marriage for several months now." Jessica's confident demeanor cracked slightly. "What kind of investigation?" David opened the box and pulled out a thick folder. "Well, let's start with the recordings. Marcus, would you mind playing the conversation from April 20th? The one where Jessica's mother coaches her on how to document fake abuse allegations." The blood drained from Jessica's face as my voice filled the room, playing back the crystal-clear audio of her mother's instructions. "You need to start writing down every argument, every raised voice, every time he seems angry. Make it sound worse than it was. The courts always believe the woman, especially when there's a pattern of documented incidents." Rebecca Torres looked stunned. "How did you obtain these recordings?" "Security cameras in my own home," David replied smoothly. "Perfectly legal in this state. We have over 50 hours of recordings documenting the conspiracy between Jessica and her family to fabricate abuse allegations and defraud my client in the divorce proceedings." Jessica tried to speak, but David continued. "We also have evidence of financial fraud." "Jessica, did you think we wouldn't discover the secret bank accounts your mother helped you open? The money she's been funneling to your attorney? The assets you've been attempting to hide?" He pulled out another folder, this one filled with bank statements and financial records. "Your mother has contributed over $60,000 to fund this divorce, money that was never declared as income. Your brother Austin has been advising you on how to undervalue Marcus's business assets. Your sister Michelle has been preparing false testimony about Marcus's alleged drinking problem." Jessica's attorney looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence mounted. "Mr. Kim, even if these recordings exist, they don't negate the underlying issues in the marriage." "Actually, they do," David interrupted. "Because they prove that every allegation in your filing is fabricated. We have recordings of Jessica laughing about Marcus's supposed anger issues. We have her mother coaching her on how to fake emotional trauma. We have her brother discussing ways to hide assets that legally belong to my client." I watched Jessica's face as the reality of her situation sank in. She'd spent months planning to destroy me, convinced that her family's manipulation would be enough to steal half of everything I'd worked for. Now she was facing the possibility of criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. "There's more," David continued, pulling out a third folder. We have evidence of parental alienation, recordings of Jessica and her family coaching the children to lie about their father. Documentation of attempts to poison Lily and Connor against Marcus. In family court, parental alienation is taken very seriously. Jessica finally found her voice. You can't use our children as weapons in this divorce, Marcus. They love me. They need their mother. They need both their parents, I replied, feeling the weight of every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about what this was doing to them. But they don't need to be manipulated and lied to by adults who should be protecting them. Jessica, you've been using Lily and Connor as pawns in your family's scheme to destroy me. That ends now. David spread out the final set of documents. These are our counter-claims. We're seeking full custody of the children based on evidence of parental alienation. We're demanding restitution for the fraud and conspiracy. And we're filing criminal complaints against Jessica's mother and brother for their roles in the scheme. Rebecca Torres looked defeated. Mr. Kim, surely we can reach some kind of settlement. No settlements, I said firmly. Jessica and her family declared war on me and my children. They want to play games with our family. They can face the consequences in court. Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. Marcus, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we don't have to destroy each other. Think about Lily and Connor. I am thinking about them, I replied. I'm thinking about how you've been poisoning them against their father for months. I'm thinking about how you've been teaching them that lying and manipulation are acceptable. I'm thinking about protecting them from the toxic influence of your family. David began packing up the evidence. Jessica, Rebecca, you have 48 hours to withdraw your filing and agree to our terms. If you don't, we'll file our counter-claims and release these recordings to the court. The judge will hear every word of your family's conspiracy. As Jessica and her attorney left, I felt the weight of what I'd just done. This wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about protecting my children from people who would use them as weapons. The man who'd walked into this room an hour ago had still hoped for some kind of reconciliation. Now I understood that some betrayals can't be forgiven, especially when they involve your children. Over the next 2 days, my phone rang constantly. Jessica's mother Patricia called, alternating between threats and pleas. Austin called, trying to convince me that they'd only been trying to help Jessica. Michelle called, claiming the whole thing was a misunderstanding. But I didn't answer any of their calls. I'd heard enough of their lies and manipulation. On the third day, Rebecca Torres called David to request a meeting. Jessica had apparently spent the weekend listening to the recordings David had provided, finally understanding the scope of evidence against her family. She was ready to negotiate. The meeting took place in David's office, with Jessica looking defeated and ashamed. Her attorney had clearly advised her that fighting the evidence would be futile and potentially criminal. My client is prepared to withdraw her filing, Rebecca Torres announced. In exchange, she's asking for reasonable visitation rights and a modest settlement to help her establish a new residence. David shook his head. After what she's put Marcus and the children through, after the fraud and conspiracy, she's lucky we're not seeking criminal charges. What do you want? Jessica asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at the woman who'd shared my life for 12 years, who'd borne my children, who'd been my partner in building our life together. The woman who'd betrayed me so completely that I could barely recognize her. I want my children protected from your family's manipulation, I said. I want you to sign a custody agreement that gives me primary custody with supervised visitation for you until you can prove you won't use Lily and Connor as weapons. I want your mother, brother, and sister to have no contact with my children until they can demonstrate they understand the damage they've caused. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, they're my family. You can't cut them out of the children's lives completely. They cut themselves out when they decided to destroy our family for money, I replied. Jessica, your mother coached you to lie about abuse. Your brother helped you hide assets. Your sister was prepared to commit perjury. These people have no business being around our children. David slid a document across the table. This is our final offer. Jessica keeps her personal belongings and receives a modest settlement to help her transition to independent living. Marcus retains all business assets and the family home. The children live primarily with Marcus, with Jessica having supervised visitation until she completes family counseling, and demonstrates she can co-parent without her family's interference. Jessica read through the agreement, her hands shaking. What about my mother? My siblings? You're asking me to choose between my children and my family. You already made that choice when you let them manipulate you into betraying your husband and children, I said. This is just the consequence of that decision. Rebecca Torres advised her client to sign the agreement. The evidence against Jessica and her family was overwhelming, and fighting it would likely result in criminal charges and complete loss of custody. Jessica had no choice but to accept the terms. As Jessica signed the papers, I felt the full weight of what we'd lost, but I also felt the resolve returning this was about protecting Lily and Connor now. They deserved better than to be pawns in adult games. The final blow came 2 weeks later when Patricia, Austin, and Michelle received court summons for their roles in the conspiracy. The recordings David had provided to the district attorney's office had resulted in fraud charges against all three. Patricia faced additional charges for elder abuse after investigators discovered she'd been stealing from her own elderly father to fund Jessica's divorce. Jessica's family had spent months planning to destroy me, convinced that their manipulation and lies would be enough to steal my children and my life's work. Instead, their own words had destroyed them. Patricia lost her job when her employer learned about the fraud charges. Austin's latest business venture collapsed when his partners discovered his legal troubles. Michelle's husband filed for divorce, citing her involvement in the conspiracy as evidence of her character. The community that had once respected Jessica's family now saw them for what they truly were: manipulative predators who tried to destroy a father's relationship with his children for financial gain. The same neighbors who'd watched Jessica's family's behavior for years now came forward with their own stories of manipulation and lies. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, watching Lily and Connor do their homework at the same table where Jessica had tried to destroy our family. They were healing from the trauma of their mother's manipulation, slowly learning to trust again. Jessica had completed her counseling and was beginning to rebuild her relationship with them, but under strict supervision and without her family's toxic influence. The divorce was final, my children were safe, and the people who tried to destroy us were facing the consequences of their actions. Jessica's family had learned that manipulation and lies have a price, and sometimes that price is everything you claim to value. They'd gambled with our family's future and lost everything that mattered. As I tucked Connor into bed that night, he looked up at me with clear, trusting eyes. "Daddy, are you really all we have now?" I thought about Jessica's words from that day she'd packed her bags about how family was supposed to be everything. But real family doesn't manipulate and betray. Real family protects and supports. "No, buddy," I said, smoothing his hair. "We have each other, and that's everything we need." Justice had been served, and my children were finally free from the manipulation that had nearly destroyed them. That was all that mattered.